you're doing it. There it is. So used to that. So I call to order the special meeting of the Citizens Oversight Committee for May 16th, 2023. And Martina, if you could now call the roll.
Certainly. Kingston Cole.
Here.
Larry Chu.
Here.
Lucy Dilworth.
Here.
Larry Minikis.
Here.
John McCauley.
Here.
Rebecca Suggs.
Here.
Jennifer Howard.
Here.
Chair Randolph.
Here.
And for the record, member Jenny Biggs is not with us this afternoon.
Okay. So do any committee members or staff have adjustments to the agenda that they would like? Hearing none, we will move on. So now open time for public expression.
If there,
Yeah, I'll read. I wish I could skip my words. The public is welcome to address the Citizens Oversight Committee at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. Please be advised that pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2, the board is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matters not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. And if everyone could please silence your cell phones during the meeting or mute your microphone.
Anybody know how to set
so if there are any members of the public wishing to speak on items currently not on the agenda only, please raise your hand in the reactions. And Madam Chair, we currently do not have any attendees at the meeting, for the meeting at this time.
Good, thank you. So executive officers report.
All right. You all responded to the doodle poll. We're getting close to landing on a date for the COC retreat, which will be facilitated by Todd Cusimano and Megan Azevedo. I have a ton of respect for Todd, and I appreciate Todd offering to help us facilitate. I know we have some challenges with the 30th, especially since it's the 4th of July weekend. So Martina will be sending out a poll soon to look at July 10th or July 14th, and then we can land on the day that we get the most participation. The rest of my executive officer report is going to be kind of around establishing some boundaries as far as flows of communications, and part of it is because, and I hate establishing boundaries, I want a complete open door, but I think sometimes the lack of boundaries can lead to some confusions. I received an information request following our last meeting from one of our members, both via email and voicemail. And I completely appreciate the desire for the information. But I advised the requesting party that all of the information that had been requested had already been provided, but not all of it was in that way that we necessarily wanted to see the information. And I really was not intending, especially since it was agreed most of the time that I recall, not to ask the member agencies to amend these reports. And since it was an answer that I knew that the recipient wasn't really going to want to have, I called rather than respond by email. Following that request, another member requested the following information via email to President Redoni and Board Member Goins while CCing me. Again, I appreciate the request for information, but the first sentence of the request says, I'm writing to request some help from the Board of Directors for the Citizens Oversight Committee. And I could be wrong, but I feel this is inappropriate for an individual board or committee member to be going to a board member or a pair of board members, asking them to direct staff to provide information without the overall direction from the COC. So the request was as follows. For each project in the 2021-2022 MWPA work plan, meaning all core, D-space, and local projects, we need first bullet point, the project's type, description, purpose, which is already contained in the work plan. That was part of the script. The work's projected estimated costs, which is already in the work plan. the work project's actual costs, and if there is a discrepancy between estimated and actual costs of the project, an explanation for the difference. And a 2-week deadline was placed on that request. So following that email, President Bordoni and Member Goins asked to have a meeting with me. And so I informed them of especially Bruce is well involved, Dennis not as well involved. So I gave them some background information. I talked about how the 4 ad hoc subcommittees were formed. I talked about how we worked through how the Brown Act can or cannot allow. So I talked about how the writing subcommittee was disbanded. I mentioned that all 3 subcommittees have submitted their portions of the reports, but to this date, no section has been approved or voted on. And I think you guys can all agree that there is some disagreement amongst the COC members on whether or not we need to evaluate every project within the work plan. So I mentioned that. I also did seek council's opinion on that, and reviewing the JPA language and the ordinance language. Council does not feel that the COC is obligated to review every project funded by Measure C. I also advise them, with the exception of the explanation of the discrepancies between between proposed and actual costs, all of this information had been delivered to the COC, mostly through ad hoc subcommittees, in November of 2022, so 6 months ago. And other items had been, again, those same items had been retransmitted subsequent times since then. The core spreadsheet of tracking costs, and that's probably our best documentation we have. Not probably, it is the best documentation of projects that we have, where it says the project name, project code, project, how much has been budgeted, if we transferred any in from rollover, and then how much was spent, and whether or not we were over budget or under budget. Last year, no over budget. This year, we'll have some over budget. That was transferred to the work plan subcommittee and finance subcommittee in November 22. And then we've talked about the 17 members' reports from the local and D-Space. The transparency report with the questions that you had asked, Pat, got me to dig into them again and actually do a agency by agency review. And I felt 8 of them they were pretty easy to discern the information that we needed. It wasn't in the table like we would like it to be. 8 of them, it was reasonable, in my opinion, to get the information out of it. 1 of them was super complicated.
What's the point of this? You're talking about boundaries. Now you're making a case for something.
I'd really like to let him finish.
I would, yeah, but I'd also like to know, what is the point?
I'm getting to the point.
Okay, well, I'm taking your time.
I just think that this is really uncalled for and rude.
I'm sorry, but
And I've
the man
experienced
is
this before
arraigned
with you.
a person in this room. Okay, you don't have to name him, but it's all by innuendo. All right, going through a whole case here without discussion. Is it an executive officer's report, or is he just making his case? All right, basically the other person is completely wrong and shouldn't have done something. You start out by talking about boundaries. I wish you would discuss boundaries. Okay?
I would like to hear him finish.
Please go ahead.
So at numerous meetings, it's been agreed upon by the CO as a whole or at subcommittee level that we were not going to ask about member agencies to redo the 21-22 reports. However, we were going to target the 22-23 reports for the improved format. And that is to send them spreadsheets with all the information that you guys are asking for. 2 of the members of the subcommittee, work plan subcommittee, met with me. We went through my file structure. I showed 2021's file structure. I showed 21-22's file structure. I showed where we have each of our member agencies. They asked for 3 towns to look at. We went through them. Some of them were good. Some of them were on the more complicated side. You actually guys picked one of the complicated ones. And then while this is a boundary issue, while it's obvious that MWPA is obligated to provide the information you request, we're not necessarily obligated to format it in the way that you guys want it. We are obligated to give you the information in the way that we have it, and the way that we digest it, and the way that we use it. Now, I have pledged for 22-23 that we're going to make it much more in line with the way you guys are asking for it. So I advise Bordoni and Goins that I'm really focusing on our member agencies to get the focus on 23-24's work plan development And in a few months, I'm gonna be asking them to close out 22, 23 with the spreadsheets like I have been promising. I don't think it's appropriate to go back to 21, 22 at this time, especially after 6 months' time. Again, that's a boundary issue. So they advised me to share that information with the respondent. So I sent that response. We had some back and forth dialogue. And there's a misunderstanding of the request for information at the last COC meeting. My understanding of the request was to send you guys spreadsheets from the work plan that were created, the PDFs in the work plan, into Excel sheets, editable format. So I did that night. Unfortunately, this is where I made a mistake. Through speed rather than thoroughness, it didn't have the local and DSpace. They had all the core spreadsheets, but not the local and DSpace. So this is where another boundary comes in. If for further information requests like this, my suggestion is that it needs to be a formal request that has a motion seconded and voted. And if you don't agree with my decision as executive officer, then that motion will need to include to go to the board of directors to instruct staff to follow that. So the boundary is, I do think a boundary was crossed with a member going straight to the board without having this full COC's discussion on that. And then here's just, I think you guys have been disrespectful to your own time. And I mean, I really do, looking at it from your perspective. You guys have had numerous COC meetings. You guys have put a ton of time in, and I appreciate the time that you guys put into this. I really do. You guys have made us a better organization through your efforts. You've had special COC meetings. You've had ad hoc COC meetings. I think it's time for you to, you've got some really good stuff on paper. It's time for you to move forward. I think my suggestion is that you use these next 2 meetings to improve the 3 reports that you have drafted. That way we can get it edited, compiled, off to the graphic design so we can get it submitted. And there was another confusion that I want to help straighten up, and that's 2 hours. We had heard some people voice the desire to stop meetings at 2 hours. So we've been letting you know when we're getting close to 2 hours. By no means were we trying to say it's time to end the meeting. We were just trying to appreciate that desire for 2 hours.
I think that makes sense. I don't think we should be meeting for longer than 2 hours ever,
Right.
unless it's a special retreat.
I'm kind of the other way around.
What?
I've always been the other way around. You just get it done if you have the energy to. I mean, it's one thing to be 10 o'clock at night or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. If you need an extra 15 minutes, but you don't have to call a special meeting, just get the work done. Just look at it situational and
Situational,
situational.
Yeah,
Good
This
common
is
sense
evidence.
on that.
And one thing to keep in mind, if it's on the agenda and you aren't going to address it on that meeting, you do have to make a motion and a vote on continuation to the next meeting. And so
It's
that,
evidence, we need to discuss it.
I just, right.
Well, this is not an agenda item, so I don't know how much we can really discuss it. It's probably more
Open for
appropriate for the
questions.
retreat. Yes, I was going to say you can ask him questions, clarifying questions, but it would be hard for anybody inappropriate to comment on this topic.
I want to comment indirectly. Perhaps at a future meeting, we should relook at our bylaws and see if we need to add some language or just some language.
And that is an agenda item staff's recommending for the retreat. The recommended agenda items is Brown Act refresher training. All boards and councils should go through Brown Act refresher training.
Yeah.
Your standards of what you guys are looking for out of your report, the #1 work product of the COC, just like #1 work product of the MWPA is, as far as on paper, is the work plan. And then a look at the bylaws and see if you guys want to make amendments to the bylaws. Yeah. And I think that's a reasonable agenda given the time frame that we have kind of landed on.
And we may want to have an ad hoc bylaw committee ahead of that, just to sort of set the groundwork.
Totally open up. Yes.
So I would like to address, because I should come out and say that I was the one who contacted the board and asked if we could get some information which to my understanding, at the last COC meeting, we had reached an agreement that we were going to be having a special meeting to move forward with the draft, with the attempt to try and get the tax measure review done. Now, I did not see the November document that you sent, but I did see it as, since we now no longer have a report writing committee, we're attempting to get the COC moving together to move ahead to get this thing done. And it wasn't clear to me that what you had sent was what we had asked for.
Minus the local entity space.
Right. And also, as you acknowledged, without the explanation, which you've been upfront about, that I was confused what was going on. I had wondered if as I understood it, you had been asked, but you were saying that you weren't going to ask the jurisdictions to redo, which as I was concerned about, because I did not understand why the jurisdictions would have to redo anything. I thought that if it was in that big document, it could be winkled out. I knew that the work plan subcommittee had given up doing that because they found it so complicated. And therefore I was wondering if, since you seem to have a grasp of what we needed, whether you could provide it. And as I understood it, you were saying no. So I asked the board, based on my understanding that the COC had agreed this is the direction we were going to go. I did not intend to set the fox amongst the hen house or do anything, but I was just trying to get it clear as to what information we had, what we were lacking, what we were going to get, what we were not going to get, and how this was all going to be, because we had agreed that this meeting was going to be about that review. Now, if we can't do that, then we can't do that, but was what was motivating it.
And this is not a trying to lay fault. People hear things in different ways, and you and I heard the request in different ways.
Okay.
Oh, and I was going to add to that, and I actually went back and looked at the recording of the meeting, and it was after Jennifer had left, and you asked, if the work plan committee would agree to put together those tables or charts, and I repeatedly said, only half of the work plan committee's here. I can't speak for the entire work plan committee. And I probably made a mistake, but I called you the next day and said, if we did the core, could we then move on? And that was the point at which you said, no, the core, it had to be the core and the local. And that was the end of our conversation.
So just one point on that, which is just that I was never intending that you would have to create tables. It was just that, and I didn't think that was actually mentioned in the thing, that I didn't want tables except just for ease of review. Yeah.
I kind of want to repeat something that I think Mark said, because it's making me pretty uncomfortable. I don't think it would be okay for me to go directly to the board to ask them questions about something that anybody was working on, you or anybody else. So I just want to clarify that that's
the core.
that's the core issue here
Yeah,
right
it's
now.
not, it's not the point.
All right, I want to voice it again, because I feel like, I don't want to use language that's too
We're getting
strong,
into
but
the issue,
it feels like it's wrong to me.
Well, I just wanted to let you know that I was talking to Bruce, and Bruce suggested that I write. It was not my intention to send off a missive to say. I was talking to him, and he said, "Well, why did you just write me an email?" And then he said, "Write it to President Rodoni as well, and CC Mark." So I wasn't thinking it through. So I thought, well, okay, if it just we need the items itemized. I was not sort of sending off a complaint letter.
Right,
So put it that way. I was trying to get our business done. So it wasn't I was speaking to Bruce, not to the board. Okay.
Okay,
And Lucy, it's not finger pointing, it's how do we go forward and waive it? We avoid this kind of thing. You
I
know,
agree,
That's
I
all.
agree.
I mean, that's really what it's coming down to. Yeah.
On the flip side of it, Bruce put up his hands a little bit,
Mhm.
you know, saying, you know, you really need to talk to staff.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, because we do have informal relationships.
Yeah.
You know, so just need to recognize where there are boundaries sometimes that you might forget about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, and the informality, there's real positives to it because we can all communicate with each other. We're all trying to do the same positive thing at the end of the day. You know? We don't have competing agendas, so to speak. We want this to succeed.
Mm.
Around the boundary issue. So I was the first one that started the chain by going to Mark to say, here's what I think we need. Can we talk about, you know, how are we gonna get it? Do we have it? Should we have it? And he and I did talk on the phone. Do we think it's a boundary issue that I went directly to Mark? Is there some, I didn't know what committee, we don't have all the committees left. I'm not a member of the committees that are left, well, transparency, but I wasn't sure how to even handle that.
I think in these meetings, I think if there's discussion to be had about things that we're working on, especially if there's a committee that is charged with this particular area, that the place to have discussions with Mark and anybody is in these meetings so that we can all talk about it and it can all be public.
We had that discussion and we were moving ahead. to
But
the
why
next
did
meeting
she then need to call Mark? Or you need to talk to Bruce?
Because we
In
didn't.
my
have-
estimation, we didn't have all the information that we needed.
Well, then why not ask for it in these meetings?
We did.
I did.
It's just that- that-
And it was, and I want to be completely reachable for you all. But it's the confusion that you pointed out, Lucy. You were 100% accurate in your email when you said there was confusion on the request. And so that's kind of the boundary I'm thinking that we need to establish, is so that I understand or staff understands what the overall understanding was. Because I have a feeling that different members of the committee understood that request differently as
I think so
well.
too.
And I think the deal would have, raising hand, asking question, not asking question, making a comment. I think maybe the process to follow is when we get to the end of a topic, summarize with, here's what I think we're ending with and what we need to move forward with. When we get to the end of the meeting, here's what I think we did, here's where I think we need to go forward, am I missing anything? It's like, you know, back to square one in school, what you had to do. But I think maybe making sure we're all walking out the door with that same understanding of where we're ending and where we're gonna go to might have, none of this may have happened.
100% agree. I walked out of that door with a different understanding as you.
And I did too. I had an entirely different understanding than of even when I asked Mark if he had the thing in a form that could be copied.
So that's for the editable thing.
Yes.
The editable thing,
That's
and
right.
I was thinking about creating a chart, not editing the information.
And then I let speed get in the way of thoroughness.
And
So just go back to repeat one thing, if you don't mind. It is correct that the attorney has determined that there is not an obligation to look at every single project. That's right.
Right, but that is not what we determined at the last meeting.
There was a robust discussion of it, and there
Right,
was
and
disagreement.
the
There was
agreement was that we
disagreement.
would move forward with this special meeting in the attempt to complete the Measure C review. Now, if we're not gonna do that, we're not gonna do that, and we can move on to the drafts we have. But that was the COC discussion. So whether or not it's required by the statute, and I still think I have a disagreement with the legal opinion but that's not relevant at this point. We actually decided that we would do that. And I'm willing to say that we actually can't, we're not going to, and we can move on. So there we go, we can move on.
Okay, Well,
Just one more thing. I think if we're gonna talk about something for you to help, guide our discussion for the retreat is a better understanding of what staff resources you have and what their role is in relation to the COC.
Excellent point.
And are we gonna talk about the retreat at the next meeting?
We can agendize that.
Yeah.
I think that would be good,
I agree.
and because I think we
Please,
need to.
please bring it up when we get to future agenda items.
yes.
Mark, do you think it might be more successful if you put out more than just 2 dates?
Well, we put out 2 already, we're putting 2 additional. So,
I know.
and I'm, Todd and Megan's time are hard to pin down when they're both available. So again, if we were to do that, it would be even later. So
Right.
it's up to you guys when you want to do it.
No, I think it's important that.
I mean,
we
I just
tell
already
them
know that one of those is impossible, so.
that if one of them is good. Okay, so it is now 3:30 exactly, according to my iPhone, which I think knows what time it is. So that means we have an hour and a half left. I am committed, now that I think we're all in agreement that where we're going with this, that we're going to improve or work on what we have and try to approve that. And at the end of each segment, go ahead and take a vote that as amended, that we are approving that. And I'd like for us to have some sort of time frame to be looking at that. We have an hour and a half left to get away from here. A more or less time that we've all set aside for this. So 20 minutes for.
I can do mine in 3 minutes.
Okay.
Hey, Larry.
Yeah. So let us move on to the man who can do it in 3 minutes. Yes,
So you're assuming that today is 2 hours?
I'm assuming that
Okay,
if,
Thereabouts, right? Almost 10 minutes
thereabouts.
more, we can run.
these guys who have been on city council meetings that are used to them going to 11 o'clock at night have different opinions.
Certainly.
I think more or less 2 hours. Do you have a different point of view?
I'm kind of more with those guys because I'm used
Finish
to
it?
long meetings to get the work done, but that's why we're gonna discuss it.
And I have a Corte Madera Town Council meeting.
Yeah,
so
and
I
I've
do
got
that
marine
first.
water
Okay.
fees tonight.
Okay,
It's gonna be a
today's good.
4 to 6 hour meeting.
Oh.
So it's gonna be long.
I'm letting it go.
Went through many of them.
Okay, so we are going to move ahead. Oh, I forgot to, do we have any members of the public?
We do.
Will you
We
finish,
do?
Mark?
Okay. Do we all agree that I can skip all the wording about going
Yes.
out to the members of the public?
Unless someone shows up. If you see someone. pop
If
in.
someone comes up, I will make
Okay.
sure to inform you all.
Okay, so then I do not have to go out for public comment on the executive officer's report, so we are moving on to action items and finance.
Okay, there have been no substance changes in the last 2 or 3 months. The only thing we've added are some clarifying comments from questions that have come up from other COC members. The original intent of this document was just to verify that certain metrics were met, and if they were not, that a recommendation was put in. As a result of that, there are some things that we had pointed out where it was about what, in terms of the policies. Did a policy occur? Yes, it did. But we did not discuss the policy, but there were a couple of things where some COC members felt that it did not apply to the MWPA, and as a result of that, maybe put in something that would make it specific so it would not mislead the public or have somebody draw a false conclusion. For example, compensation of officers, where officers don't get compensated. All we did was to state that, yes, there's a policy for the compensation of officers. So unless I have put in clarifying comments on everything that I've seen feedback on, unless there's additional comments that you'd like to make, I would I entertain a motion to
I
approve.
have just
And I
one,
could do screen share if you guys would like.
I just have one very small one, and I don't know if we need to screen share, because it's right in the very first paragraph. And it just, you mentioned the words goals and objectives, right, very first, very top one. In accordance with the goals and objectives, see, under background. And I just keep saying whose goals and objectives? Is it the JPA's goals and objectives, the MWPA's goals? Now, if we could just get an extra word in there, that's, I'd like that, just to understand, because goals and objectives seem a little unclear as to where they're anchored.
Who else would it be?
Well,
I'm
it's
just
just
saying,
language,
I
it's
mean,
just wordsmithing.
Yeah, I mean,
If we
we're
could say,
getting to the point.
is
if
it
we
the
have to start
JPAs?
clipping-
is it the JPA's?
I have a typo for you.
Yeah, I know, that's okay, but, you know, this language actually came out of something on the website, because at some point, I had used a different word that was probably neither of the two, so to make it consistent with what's already there, that's what I ended up putting in. So I guess, you know, one of the things here that, you know, we want to get through this, what's okay?
Well, this is as much words, if we do not have a writing committee,
Yeah,
we're doing it this level. I would like some clarification just to anchor that term goals and objectives. We can say MWPA's goals and objectives. We can say the JPA's goals and objectives. It just, the little phrase right there in the middle seems awkward and slightly confusing. So add a word.
yeah, okay, I'm using this basically as an example to make sure we get through our 2 hours.
Well, you know what? This
Yeah.
is, if once we've agreed that we were now going to do what writing at this COC level, it takes what it takes. Now, I'm willing to agree substantively with everything that you've written. This is something that I've stumbled over every time, and I just would like a word or two extra or it removed. It's no substantive disagreement. It's a clarification.
All right,
Can you just take out goals and?
I would love that. That's what I asked for
Just take
several
it out.
times. But Larry seems to feel that that's not.
no, as I said, this is taken straight out of JPA, not JPA language, but the website. You know, so
We did have to put the website.
one of the things that, you know, I've gotten feedback on is exactly this type of thing. And we're trying to find some congruence between what is already published and just trying, in this case, this is not important. I don't care about whether we add MWPA or not. What I do care about is this process and making sure that we use our time in the best manner that we can, and to make sure that what is, let's just say, you know, okay versus we really need to do this.
Maybe a poll, a quick reaction as to whether people are satisfied with the current language or want to go.
Oh, yeah,
So
no,
is it
as
from
I
the
said, this is-
MWPA's website?
Yeah.
And
But as I
Mark,
said, this
is
is-
it the
It's not about the
MWPA?
language for Larry.
Yeah, I
I
don't
mean-
care, I don't care what you put in here. I'll put the MWPA in here.
Thank you.
But just as we kick it right off, and we're
Yeah.
trying to make sure that we get through this, and, you know, Mark's recommendation is let's just publish it.
I have a feeling that the writer, when they get a hold of it, will change it if it needs to be changed.
Well, it literally confused me every
Yeah,
time
no,
I
I
read it.
understand Lucy.
So it seems like a minor tweak.
Yeah, I
I
see them
understand.
really as one and the same.
Well,
You know,
I think it's obvious who it is.
yeah,
I don't think you
you're
have to make
quoting the
a change.
GPA agreement, and then you say goals and objectives, and then you mention tax measure. Those are 3 different things. If you've got the goals and objectives, you could at least attribute them to some source. The agencies, this is just a minor word thing there. It's not conceptually a vast disagreement.
yeah. What I'm trying to make sure is that, is it really minor? I'm not questioning.
Okay, no,
Yeah,
this is what
I've
I'm
said it like for about
misunderstanding.
the 3rd or 4th time. You know, this is not about what I've written here. This is
It-
about the process, you know, we've kicked it off right here. And we're looking at, you know, what some might consider okay and others not.
Right, so
But-
let's
but-
take a vote.
but
Let's
I,
move ahead.
you know, I
It's-
don't even want to go through the vote, put it in. But
You
we
put it,
can't-
okay, then
yeah, but
fine, we
but
can move ahead
can't-
with your
okay,
draft, it's
but we-
done.
yeah,
We
but
can
we
then
can't-
move on to the next one.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we don't continue to do this.
It takes what
Oh.
it takes once we don't have a writing committee.
Yeah, but what's the old saying? What perfection is the enemy of,
We're so far from perfection, we
Yeah,
needn't
so-
worry about that.
so accept it for what it is.
I will if there's just a minor addition of a word, and then we can move on.
All right, Pat, put the word in. It's not that important to me. What's more important to me right now is how we continue this discussion productively.
MWPA,
Okay, thank you.
and we will verify that.
And I heard that in edit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Page
it's on the
3,
typo.
under
Yeah.
policies, the last sentence, in the third paragraph, expenses is misspelled.
It
How
is,
about
wow.
that?
Didn't show up in red.
A suggestion, after this is all said and done, we get this all buttoned up. At least, I'm on the TAM COC. We have a committee that works with the editor, the person that puts it
I
up.
actually reached out to Ann Richmond based on your suggestion.
Yeah, but I'm saying, there's a committee that works, doesn't mess with anything except just style, making sure everything's, we might want to have, 2 or 3 people, all right, from the COC, work with them so that the continuity flows through. And sometimes that takes care of problems like we just discussed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Good agenda item, I think, for next meeting, so we can actually.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay,
Right, it's,
so. do
Yeah,
we-
John?
I have one comment.
Yeah.
In the blue there, it is unstated in the JPA agreement that the 10% cap is applied to total expenditures or each individual expenditure. There is a further discussion of that question in the work plan. It basically, what it basically says is the agreement as legally written excludes the 10% across everything, and that we suggest in work plan that should be revisited. So I think that this should conform to the other section, and if you simply is just refer to the other section, the tie,
Yeah.
or the writer should tie them together, because this is a little inconsistent. There was a bunch of back and forth at the last meeting about IE versus EG.
Yeah, well, that was the original intent of the writing committee. It wasn't for the writing committee to be writing stuff. It was to tie together a single voice so that everything
That
was
was never settled.
consistent. What?
I didn't think that was ever settled. That was one of the reasons why it got disbanded, because there wasn't a very clear mission. Which is why we're now going ahead with our retreat.
Okay, we'll save that for the retreat.
Yes,
Okay,
Anyway, my point is that this language is unstated in the agreement, is that language needs to conform to what we eventually end up with in the work plan, which we will probably not get to today based on the great speed with which we are progressing, but just note that, okay? All right.
so what I would like to do now, unless somebody else has some substantive comment, is let's vote on this with the addition of the MWPA and the understanding that it will conform to what ends up in the work plan.
I'm sorry, can I ask one other question too? I apologize. There's been a debate as to where the prior year results are updated as to whether they're gonna go into each of the individual groups or will be in one place. We don't have to cover that right now, but when we vote, let's just remind ourselves that this could change if that decision changes. You know what I'm saying?
The recommendations.
the recommendations from last year's.
Yeah, okay.
Right, subject to.
Okay, and that's really a transparency question.
Right, exactly.
So can we have a
So moved.
motion and, a motion and,
Subject to amendments and also to the edits that occurred today.
okay, and a second?
Second.
And since we're all in the room, we can just have a voice vote, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, unless it's not unanimous.
Shall we go around the
Roll
room
call, it's
quickly?
not
All those in
unanimous.
favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
Hands up.
Okay, I think
I
we've
can't
got
remember
one
the
done.
rules.
Okay.
Okay,
All in favor, opposed, abstained.
Yeah, but there was a thing where I heard if you were all unanimous, it was fine, but if you weren't, you needed a
I
roll
haven't seen
call.
that, I'll look it up.
Just.
the minutia of the Brown Act, or no, of whoever's rules. Okay, one down, let's move on to transparency.
Okay.
So I'm not quite sure the best way to go about this. There were some written comments. Should we take those up first?
I'm just looking at it right now, just the first page. And the change with the findings.
I'm trying to find it.
I don't see any comments there on the first page.
There's nothing on the first page, right?
Right.
On the second page is a question.
Second page is a question.
Seem to have copied the same thing twice.
This is along the lines of what we've been discussing earlier.
Is-
So-
Can we put it up?
Which one do you want? Which version are you
Okay.
talking?
It seems
Which
to
version
me
would you like
the
up?
way you wrote, I'm sorry, am I interrupting something?
I think that Rebecca is the person who wrote the comments on transparency, is that correct?
We all
Not
did,
all
but
of
you,
them.
yeah.
So it's the first attachment is what you're, or the second attachment are you looking at under, no, the only attachment, never mind.
Section
Fine.
2, public access to agency information. The comment to the right of the first paragraph.
Yeah, I unfortunately printed out the
I'm
same
putting it up on
thing
the screen.
twice and don't have that.
Please tell me when to stop.
So this is the comment regarding.
Yeah.
Did we get all the information we asked for, did we not?
That's correct.
We may need to have some discussion about how we want to approach that.
So there's a distinction between, in the work plan, we try to make a distinction between asking for information and information that doesn't exist. In other words, in work plan, we're not suggesting that staff didn't provide us with stuff they had. In work plan, we suggested that staff hadn't done enough work in areas, and therefore there was nothing to provide to us. So there's a distinction there. Right, so I just wanted to point that out. I think that, yeah, so there's a distinction. I just want to make it clear that staff never refused to give us something. They just didn't have stuff to give us.
So in this transparency report, it seems to me that what you have stated in the report is simply what you did. So it doesn't seem like that the problem that we've been discussing from work plan is necessarily what you were referencing and what you
Well,
stated.
no, this is a finding, so it's a kind of summary of what that activity produced and our conclusions, our opinion about it.
The finding is down there. What,
It should, that word, however, should actually be a continuation.
I'm sorry, I was referring to the comment 1.
so you're talking.
I have another screen.
Oh, which is, I think what comment 1 leads to the language on the next page. And so if we don't agree to the language or the comment, then it doesn't go in. So it's the same issue.
Exactly. So you don't have to change anything as far as that sentence is concerned.
No,
You deal with it
it's
when you
just
get to the
a
next page.
thought bubble.
Exactly, right, I'm with you. We all together on it?
Yeah.
So now we get to the next question.
Mhm.
And I would point out that it's not really what happened. So certain agency financial information for fiscal years 21, 22 was not provided to COC and requested, it's because it didn't exist.
Okay, so this is very, very important because I think this is really getting to the issue. As far as I understand it, this mark is actually, I'd love to get the clarity on this. Do the actual costs exist anywhere? I mean, when do they exist on a table? We know they don't. And would it take some time to get it together? But do they actually exist?
Yeah.
They do.
Just 8 of them are easy to discern, 8 takes a little bit more
Okay.
effort, 1 is complicated.
All right.
And that's in the big ugly document
In the
that
big ugly
Lucy's
document.
never seen. Because she's not on one of the committee, so work plan committee got it, finance committee got it, and I got it only in the very beginning as a mistake, and it was a Brown Act violation when it went from me. Because I got it, somebody thought I was on the committee and I wasn't. So there's problem number 1. And then problem number 2 is not everybody on the COC has seen that file. Yeah, still. Because there was no request to do that or share it beyond the committees that had it.
Can you clarify for me which set of numbers, because all I got was the raw data. I'm used to working with raw data and creating my own conclusions from it. So I'm not sure
That's,
what is you're referring to.
I think you got what we all got.
I sent it to you, but I don't think you really opened it up. It was a PDF of 17 agency reports, both D-Space and local. And it was in each of the member agencies' accounting systems format.
Yeah, see, I didn't think I needed that because I had all the transaction details.
Of the core,
Yeah,
and you were only looking at the core, but I sent it to you anyway.
yeah, okay. Got it, thanks.
So if it didn't, well, oh, the rest of the finance committee was on the work plan committee, so John had seen it because he was on work plan.
So,
So where are we?
I would suggest that, if I may, I would suggest that this language just be made briefer and just refer to the work plan, which discusses the issue of the data.
This is a section which is to do with public access to agency information. It's not specifically to the work plan. So it's a point, it says, but staff plans to provide it going forward, starting fiscal year 22-23. I think that addresses Mark's point, and I think it is what it is, we move forward.
Well, maybe you might say as further discussed in the work plan section.
If
But I think it's conflating two things, isn't it? mean,
I didn't,
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing.
Okay.
Unless, are you saying something different?
Well, I heard a little bit differently when Jennifer talked about it earlier than I had before when we weren't talking about the work plan issue. Anyway, doesn't matter. I think it's a little different now.
Was financial information related to the work plan for fiscal year,
Okay,
okay?
my vision isn't this great, I have to come out here and read this.
Jeez.
I'm still confused, I'm sorry.
so can you explain?
Well, you wrote, searching for the information on website using the archives calendar button yields inconsistent results. You're not talking at all about work plan related.
You guys are in
things
different sections.
Oh, thank you, that helps.
I think you're talking on this topic.
Yeah.
Thank you, then let's, yes,
Right.
yeah, which is public access. I think, you know, this is a very oddly formatted document, so there are big spaces.
This gets
So,
used.
referencing.
Well, I know, it was intractable.
I'm not talking
See,
about financial documents.
All right, well, what I'm saying is it should read, however, certain agency financial information related to the work plan
Okay,
for fiscal year 2021-22
But
was
look at
not
what
provided
is
to
deleted.
COC.
Look at what
requested.
that's replacing. You're not talking about anything related to financial documents and what got deleted from your original document over there on the right has nothing to do with financial documents.
well, it's to do with public access, that one, the first searching for information in language could be reintroduced there. It's a small point, but if we want to make it, that was in there, we can make it.
I guess what I'm trying to say is if you leave the change in there
Yes,
and you reference financial information or work plan financial information, you've introduced something entirely different.
Okay, so the
You see,
section
your
is,
findings, DOC found all required meeting documentation, including videos, minutes, and agenda packets, et cetera, et cetera. And however, searching for information on the website using the archives calendar button, you're not talking about anything financial.
no, if you look at the section heading that this is a finding of, it's called public access to information. And that section, that whole little section that this is the finding about, is the section about the COC research the completeness and accessibility of all MWPA records.
Okay, so
We
okay, so my question is, if you leave that blue language in there, whether or not you reference the work plan, do you want to introduce that into the body of this document?
Well, this is what the comment before we get to this language says. It says, this has come up. Is this something that it says, this is developed into a problem. We might not want to move ahead with it.
That's, yeah, I think it's, are you then wanting to refer to public access to agency information? You want to include COC as the public?
Well, as it says, it should be noted that when the COC requests information, it is acting as a representative of the public. I
Okay,
mean,
so
that's-
that's what you're trying to, if that's what you would like to do then, is
Well,
to-
yeah, I'm not saying that, I mean, this is for us to discuss, but that was the point of that sentence.
okay, that's
Yeah,
what I'm getting
okay.
at, okay. All right, so then that first sentence and that first comment is relevant to what's next here.
The first sentence is the deleted,
Comment one, which we
Oh, yes,
was
yes,
trying
yes,
to
yes, yes,
discuss
yes, yes,
earlier.
yes.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
confusing,
it is,
I'll
I'm
just say
sorry.
it's confusing.
Okay,
So if you ask me to vote on this, I'll say I'm not really sure what I'd be voting on.
all right. We can, it does come up later and we can leave it there.
Mark, can you think of a sentence that goes in right after the first sentence that explains why it was not available?
I mean, I think you would need another section that's talking about
It is-
oversight.
But it does
Availability.
come up,
I'm trying to keep it
but this is
simple. No,
now
I
the
hear what you're saying.
transparency review, so.
It just, because it was incomplete results.
I would say was
Can't we just
not,
say that it's explored further in the other section? Because that other section goes into detail. You know, and what you don't want to, you want to say the whole story multiple times or just say it once? I would just,
Well, it comes up in context of different areas, so it's not a full discussion in every place.
yeah.
But so I agree, if we want to say,
This is the front
as
end.
discussed, you know, whatever page number or each or section reference we make.
Yeah, see, the problem with the sentence, as I said earlier, was it says certain financial information for the fiscal year was not provided to the COC when requested, implying that staff is withholding information. And that's not the circumstance. That's how I read it.
I know, but I'm trying to get him
Yeah.
to help us out here
right,
and say, what,
How about-
there was
how about
nothing
not provided in the
deleterious.
format requested.
Okay.
Well, one of the things, your phrasing at the beginning was not available, which is different than
Yeah.
when not, not provided, because I had the same reaction that John did.
Not available as requested.
Well, it was just not available in what the format.
Yeah.
The board
Yeah.
oversight?
Okay, then we can just.
It
keep
makes the questions, a little explanation is all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
just keep it
But, okay,
simple.
but
If the
I-
format was not available, then just say not available in the format requested.
I
yeah,
support that.
yeah.
That's
Okay, well,
in our section.
then I
Then
think
that
that,
leaves who, in my mind then, who requested it? Sounds like the COC asked for it in a certain format and he wouldn't give it to us.
well, we're gonna say was
Not available.
not
in the
available
format.
to the COC when requested.
Let's remember what we asked for. Sorry to interrupt again. What we asked for was evidence that Mark had reviewed the expenditures for the 220s with sufficient rigor, I guess, and supporting documentation for us to come in behind him and then say, okay, yes, those expenditures were appropriate, right?
Well,
Because
that was your
No.
request. I think our request based on the last meeting was that and this is the difference between whether we do the Measure C analysis and whether we do the JPA analysis. I'm putting aside the Measure C analysis, which should, based on what we asked for last year, based on what we reviewed last year, was what we would want to see again. We didn't see it. I'm willing to even take this out because we do discuss it later.
Yeah.
I do think though it does affect or is relevant to the context of transparency, not because I think there's anything nefarious going on, but that it's just one of the things, public access to information means that they or we or anybody can totally see what's going on when we ask for it, or when we don't have to ask for it, we just find it. If it's not available, if it's not formatted, whatever it is, the public isn't getting access.
see, yes, because the work plan focus was not on data. The work plan focus was on two questions. One, was enough work done? And then two, did the board look over the activities?
That's it.
Which are different things. than-
They are different, and I think there is, and there always has been, two parts to the analysis, which some of us always thought that the second part was there, and that's, I think, contained in the work plan document. We've always felt there was the first basis analysis, which was the work plan compared to the whole tax measure, not the JPA agreement, nothing else.
I think what we're struggling here with is a comment that was made earlier about data format. Because ultimately, if you use an open data concept, which is say what the city of Palo Alto does, you want data, here it is. You get it in its,
Raw.
unique raw form. Because a person giving it, agency giving it doesn't know how the person wants, nor do they know what question that the person is trying to ask of the data. That's why I didn't need it, because I had the raw data. I could extract out what I wanted from it. And I think what we're grappling with here is the inability to take the raw data and to get it into a format that might have helped you to answer the questions. So is that staff's responsibility or yours? And that's a retreat item as well. But we shouldn't be struggling over this here because the data was available.
Not all of it.
So what do we
Then we
propose?
can
So-
say,
Can I wordsmith with Mark a little here?
yeah,
However, certain agency financial information or work plan and financial information was not available from member agencies in the form requested, period. And I would just delete that last sentence. And I put one free. Just, let's get off that, let's-
Yeah,
that's the one that any windows in there.
I get where you're going there.
Yes.
Do we want the first searching for information sentence which was taken out, do you want that back in? Rebecca, do you want that back in?
It just seemed like
No.
apples and oranges
What
to
about the
me.
button?
Well, yeah.
I assume you yanked it out because you didn't think it was important.
I didn't think it was important, but,
Well, then
but,
fine, let's get on with
because
it.
it's been corrected.
It's
Okay.
a different,
It's already
it's a different thing.
It's
Yeah.
moot.
So then we could just say,
Not yet, it's getting there.
It's going to be fixed first.
We identified the issue.
Yes.
okay,
And I like your, I jotted down your language and I'll get in there.
all right, so we can move on.
I can't type it in this
But
form.
I'm back to, and I hate doing this, but what was deleted is so totally different from what was
Yes.
put in there, that what was deleted
I know.
had to do with, I feel
But-
like if we wanna say
I
this, we wanna
actually-
say
I
it somewhere
actually-
else.
I think I can help with the connection here.
Okay,
That first paragraph was saying, for the most part, the information is get to.
okay.
However, before this paragraph was written,
Yeah.
the archiving feature had a tweak in it. And instead of waiting for it to report to take action, Rebecca showed me where it was, so we're fixing it. So it's no longer a valid thing, so that got deleted, but then
Okay.
then an emphasis got put onto this.
Oh, okay.
So that's how we got there.
It's what he said.
Yes, yes,
Exactly.
okay,
I think
I now
absolutely
get
right.
it. What you were referring to is
So the
been
so
solved.
the finding says
Take it
all
out.
the documents are there generally. That's the first paragraph.
Mhm.
And the finding. The second paragraph of the finding is, thanks to, your edits, except that the underlying agencies didn't provide enough.
Right,
Okay,
In the format that was.
let's put it back on them.
Okay.
And I've got Kingston's wording on there.
Okay.
Generally, we had stuff, we didn't have financial stuff in the underlying agencies. That's what the finding is. That makes sense?
Yes,
Point of order, real quick. Martina, is it possible to switch your picture to the board so that anyone that looks at this or wants to review can see who was talking when? Because we're only seeing.
That's her camera, so why don't you mute your, or turn off
Is
your
it,
camera?
is there a way to default to the camera here? I don't know.
take my face off of it.
Isn't that a
When
different
you
program that we don't
watch-
have? Owl?
Just a second.
Oh, yeah, Owl.
We don't
There.
have owl.
We don't have Owl. You know, I like Owl.
What, is it the view of the,
I think when you watch the video of the meeting.
oh, for the
Yes.
minutes?
Oh, you don't think so? Oh, okay.
Larry,
think
are you asking for clarification of the
No,
minutes?
no, it's just.
What the viewers
Are we
see was
moving
not.
on?
Okay.
How about
Oh,
that?
got it, sorry, didn't mean to
Yeah.
throw us off.
Yeah, no, I think having watched several of them.
Gotcha.
Okay, so moving on.
so I'm willing to delete the next blue section on
Under
page
conclusion.
5, under conclusion, but I do think we ought to call it conclusion.
I thought, yeah, let's call it conclusion and just leave the first sentence.
Okay.
So then we get into the broader question next, which is, I think, we are, is how do we deal with the prior year results and where do they live?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because came up in the context of transparency, I was recommending we had talked about separating it off, and because this came up in the context of transparency and whether or not we got access to everything we wanted, I kept it in, though I called it a separate, previously we called it a 4-section analysis. Now it's a 3. I'm still happy to have it separated if that's what you think, and we need to work on it, that's fine.
I think it's best separated because
Okay.
some of the comments that we have in work plan
Reflected.
are expanded and they're not here in this section in a way that is consistent and accurate. And I think there'd be a lot of rewriting to do. So I would suggest that the financial stuff goes with Larry, the work plan stuff stays with us, and and then if there are transparency only comments, they stay with you guys. So.
And that is editing that we can do. We can find the financial recommendations in here, cut and paste them
Yeah.
into the.
Okay.
Yeah, because the findings on work plan as written here
Mhm.
in transparency are not consistent with what's in work plan. And I think what you would do in work plan is you have the finding from the prior year below and then say see above, because some of the findings from the prior year are expanded upon the current year. And that way you don't have to rewrite the whole thing again.
Okay, but so you don't think that a section that just says 1A recommendation last year response, 1A, 2A.
No, you should do that in each of the sections. I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, so in other words, so the section which is here, I actually.
So have previous year's recommendation under the finance portion, okay.
So under the work plan recommendation, for instance, if you go to the work plan recommendation as written here in transparency, our views will be slightly different than that because we updated to A, for instance, and then to the one on whatever the time is. But I mean, if you go through each of these items, I think it's easier to have the committee that did the section do the update.
Okay. Do they, what?
And in some cases, the update will be simply exactly the words you've already used, and in other cases, it would be referred to above where there's a further discussion. And when you get into work plan and review work plan, if we get to that today, we can explore that further as we get there.
Well, would it make sense to go to that, make sure that we're all clear on that, and then this is a sort of less complicated structure. We could come back to this I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to.
How
If we do it
about
within work
this,
plan.
how about if we approve the transparency report
Up to this section.
up
Yeah.
to this section,
Okay.
Exactly.
and then we've got something else to
Let me say
work
one
with.
other thing. That committee that I'm talking about, the editing committee, to work with the editor that's doing all the style. One person from each of the committees should be on there and they can take this apart and put it.
Yeah.
That's where you can actually do this.
Didn't we have a
Remove
brown
the substance.
sauce before?
Not once it's all come back to the CAC and then it's a new committee.
No, I'll work with Megan,
Yeah.
ask the questions and make sure we do it in a way that's
Yeah.
appropriate.
But I mean, it should be like a ministerial function. Substantively, everything has to be decided. Whether, you move everything around a little bit so it looks better graphically, or.
Yeah, we'll come back to everybody for a vote, so
Right.
that's.
Yeah, we can do that too.
And it's all content that's already been viewed by all members and public.
Okay, but that's what I'm saying, that's where you can fix it, you can really tweak.
Since all the
things.
other committees would then be disbanded, it wouldn't be
Right.
Brown Act violation at that point.
Okay, so are we,
So we're skipping this section to go to work plan, make sure we're completely on the same page
so
on
let's
that.
take a
Whoa.
vote on the rest of
Okay,
it.
yeah, let's do that.
And
When you say the rest of the transparency.
The
yes,
transparency
the rest of the
report up to this
transparency.
section.
Yeah,
Everything up to the recommendation.
is
The
that
first part.
Kingston's group?
Yes,
Okay, I just wanted clarification on the conclusion based on our previous discussion. There's
Okay.
a section
Yeah.
above it. Yeah, it's, the conclusion part. See, it says that agency has not been transparent. There's an assertion.
Lucy's recommending that
We
that
delete
last
that.
blue section
Right.
gets
We're
taken
taking
out.
that out.
That's the part
The whole
that gets
thing,
taken
yeah.
out.
It's one
Okay.
sentence,
Yeah.
Larry. Keep it simple.
yeah,
No, that,
So further, what we would be
I
voting on
wasn't
would be.
sure,
yeah.
I lost track of what we were voting. on.
Yes.
So if maybe I'll make a motion. So the motion would be that we approve transparency up to the stopping point of the responses from the prior year with the following changes. One, in the conclusion section, the blue part be removed, and then in the earlier section where we talk about the first finding with the however, certain agency financial information, those words will be updated as Kingston has suggested.
And
Okay,
I wrote that.
Okay, so that make that motion? Is there a second?
I'll
go
second.
ahead.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, aye.
Yay. So, now, and just to keep everybody, it's 4:10 and we're moving on to work plan, right?
So we're gonna come back to
So-
this.
Yes.
Once we, okay.
So which work plan?
So the
iteration are we
two-
gonna look at? That's the one.
Well, I would suggest that we look at, the suggested edits from Lucy, those are the most,
I agree with
But
that.
then Rebecca, if your comments,
do you
Come
want
out
get
in
it.
a second. right.
we can look at them at the same time.
okay, let's.
My suggestion would be to go through the whole Lucy document, then go through the Rebecca document.
And I'm going to just pipe up if anyone needs support.
No, I know this.
Do you have a written version in front of you and then you can jot notes on that?
Something out.
Here, you can have my, oh, wait a minute, I have.
Okay.
I love this. Notes all over the screen of this. Would you like a notepad?
No, just.
Okay.
I mean, we can try to address both at the same time by page.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay, so
so you want to lead this discussion, Jennifer?
I'll just start us off, I think, maybe.
Yeah.
I think based on earlier discussions that we'll pass over the first page of comments.
well, there's some, I think, just really kind of
Okay,
tidy up.
let's just
type.
say the first,
Well, the first work plan section of the CAC report, we could have a discussion on that, which is whether we have a sentence in there. And then, or not, this, I guess, goes back to whether or not this was the understanding that that was what we would move forward with. If we're not going to say that, we could, I still think that, for instance, the San Rafael Ranger issue that is in the body actually belongs under the tax measure review, because I think that's the key as to where it doesn't match the tax measure, which says solely, and that the issue is that more time is spent on other things than wildfire prevention, and that's actually a tax measure point. But
I don't know, this is an open question. For me, I haven't prior to now differentiated between the GPA agreement and the tax measure. And so the question is, for the purposes of this report, do we want to get into that differentiation?
I think for this, we agreed that we would.
I don't know, I don't remember any agreement.
But you weren't there.
Yeah,
But we said we would have the special meeting to try and
That
move
was-
forward.
I understand, that was
with-
your understanding. of it.
Well, okay, but this is, all I'm asking for is a bifurcation. And the one, which is what I could call the tax measure analysis, is a sentence. And then what I call the JPA analysis. You see, the tax measure has very broad parameters. The JPA has very specific things like the 60-20-20, the 10%, all of these very precise issues come up in the JPA agreement. They do not come up in the tax measure. So the tax measure analysis is really broad and really shallow. The JPA analysis is far more sort of specific and detailed.
I guess I was concerned that if we brought the issue of the Rangers up into this, it would just confuse the way we had originally ordered it, so
It's just a question of does it contravene the JPA agreement, which might or might not, but I think it's the issue that we have found with it is that it's actually against the tax measure, and
Right,
that's far
and
stronger
that's
than.
why I opened it with, do we wanna make that differentiation for the purposes of this report, because I'm not.
Well, I
Yeah,
think-
I'm not,
we
I'm
need to
not
do
seeing
that.
why we need to make a
I
differentiation
agree.
between the JPA and the tax.
This is a very complicated section already, and we put a tremendous amount of work into it, and you changed this order like 15 times. And I think there is a logic to what we're saying right now. We start out with, we talk about what the agreement has within it. We talk about, the responsibilities that exist at the board level, at the staff level, at the COC level, and then we get into the detail thereafter. There's a logic to that.
There is, but I think there's a point in which you say this is not consistent with something or other, and the actual language is not consistent with the tax measure.
And then perhaps we can make that correction when we get to that particular
Okay,
spot
which it has been.
within this order, which is fine.
All right, all right.
But I just think that we've already spent so much effort on this topic. I'd rather let us move within. I'm worried that if you start shifting stuff around, you're gonna mess up.
Then we'll be starting.
We'll also mess up one of our points, some of our points, right?
Well, okay, if you want to present it in that order.
So where are we?
Okay, so, if we pass over that first section, I don't really wanna add another heading in here. I think it changes what we had intended in the beginning here. Which was
We're just introducing,
describing what
we're
we're gonna
introducing
do.
what the rules are, right? So,
Right.
yeah, so I'm with you. I would delete that title, and I would just say, according to the joint powers agreement, JPA agreement, which could change. And then when developing the work plan, all proposed projects are reviewed by the standing committees of the board. That is not true. That's not correct, I don't believe.
Oh,
Because the 220s are not reviewed in detail by the board. That's one of our points. So I would delete.
and they're by standing committees of the board, not and the board, of the board, and the work plan and the ops,
Oh, I
and
see.
the advisory technical are both standing committees of the board.
Oh, I see your point.
Is it
Okay.
accurate to say everything is reviewed? I know it's all presented.
I think it is
The 20,
reviewed.
well, the
That is
20
reviewed.
isn't
Totally.
on the
Yeah.
20s done, isn't one, well, I guess it was the board that just goes past it, the
And-
board doesn't approve.
Let me ask a clarification. I don't view ops as ATC. They report to the board, but they're not subcommittees of the board. Subcommittees of the board would infer the board members are
Oh, that
on
would be
it.
like finance and executive.
Yeah, so these are standing committees. that are
Standing
JPA.
committees as reviewed by MWPA standing committees or just by MWPA.
Why don't we just leave it the way it was?
Yeah, I don't know.
Board
Because-
projects are reviewed and proposed by the ATC, and everything down below, I believe, is accurate, I think, but you guys know more than I do. So why do we need that other sentence?
It's simply clarification the language is jumps to its point very quickly and doesn't sort of lead you down. If this isn't a hill that I'm gonna die on, so if you wanna take it off, then take it off, but
It is mentioned in this paragraph.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, we had a particular thought process when we read it the way we did, which was just to describe the process a little.
So let's just lock in, we're gonna kill the analysis and findings title. We're gonna kill that one sentence, right? And then we're gonna continue on. And then the next change, the overview of defensible space projects is a good change.
By the way, there are a lot of,
A lot of good changes.
a lot of good changes.
We're gonna accept most of it.
We just stumbled on the first page.
Right,
You
okay,
don't
So-
stand by the word.
go ahead.
You want me to make my comment on the first page now?
Okay, that's great.
Yes,
Share my
yes,
mind.
why don't we?
I just would, I would double.
Now, let's get it out, then we move into
Mine
the
is-
document.
Mine is just the format of the COC has not observed any evidence that the core projects were not aligned. And I'm immediately jarred by, there's a couple of knots in there, what are you hiding? So I'd like to recommend that we word it as the COC observes that the core projects for 21-22 aligned with the tax measure provisions.
So I wanted to get into this maybe a little bit later, but I have a suggestion. So we kind of, the big picture is that the concern that we had was that the 220s were not reviewed by the board, right? And then And therefore we form conclusions that say, we didn't have enough data to look at stuff and come up with an answer. As far as the 60% area is concerned, that group has way more eyeballs on it, right? And it's looked at a much higher level. And therefore, I believe we were comfortable giving some sort of a negative assertion that says, while it is correct that for some of the 60%, for instance, that goes directly to San Rafael, that Mark doesn't look into what San Rafael does with that, right? And that's part of our findings that we get into. I think a good way to clean this up would be to take this part and put it at the end.
The core.
The core, take the core conversation
Okay.
at the end and then tighten that, make it a little bit or expand a little bit to indicate why in the earlier sections, we have more significant problems, and in the later section, we are more comfortable because of all the other eyes that are on it. I think we could expand that a little bit.
All right.
To make that clearer.
Does that make sense to you?
And then I'll be watching out for the double negatives.
So if I can clarify, please. Keep this paragraph where it's at on the screen. Keep that paragraph where it's at.
What, core projects?
No, this one that I highlighted, right? Just
Oh,
this
right,
one.
yeah.
Keep that where it's at.
Correct.
Yes.
Then this paragraph gets moved down.
Correct.
Where are you proposing to move that?
To the end, after we do the other discussion of all the 20s, finish the 20s and then do the 60s.
Mark, you got
Okay, that was.
The lead. the first sentence up, you gotta go up a little higher.
Because remember later we just said we only talk about the 61.
Yeah, when
Later in the document.
developing the work
We
plan,
just talk
comma,
above and that was-
I think that will.
Oh, I don't even know if you need that, just.
You know what I'm saying? I'll
We
show you.
can-
Oh, I have that. I have that.
Okay,
close.
yeah, okay.
I'm working from what you guys can see that I'm right.
I gotta do that too.
okay.
And our little group will take what's being said and.
It's a little warm, right?
Well, one of the things that's
But I need
that's
to-
Open the door.
sort of
I always need to stretch.
been difficult for us is that some of the information that you guys know, we're now at the point where we're writing, and this is we're doing this at the CAC level.
Mm.
I almost don't see any point for the work. I mean, concepts are now here.
Mm.
Do you need to, maybe we should disband the work plan subcommittee because it's not functioning any longer as a sort of analytic format. We're all now writing.
Mark can do all the edits if he wants, or we can look at them.
Okay.
I'm
Well, I mean,
ambivalent
well,
about it, but I
this
just
is-
think,
I think we're now
Well,
all
they can
at
get it
this
done
level.
before the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just think that, like I just said in this section, I think we should expand a little bit more while we're more comfortable. Someone's gotta write that, I can
Okay,
write that.
all right.
Sure, so,
That'd be fine.
and we're used to working together, so.
Right.
Okay, so now we go to page 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I in the right place?
Yes.
Okay, on page 2, I'm sorry, but I really don't like the word ultimate.
I don't want to read it.
Okay, well, if ultimately you're saying the final word on everything is the board, right? Isn't that your point? That whatever the locals do, there's a kind of, that's what you're arguing for, is that the board ought to be exercising its authority over every project that the MWPA funds. So, and that is its final, the word is ultimate responsibility, that all agency funds are spent correctly. So that, in other words, the board's responsibility could be just one of many. You're making the point that that's where the buck stops, is the board for everything that's spent.
So in this section, we're just introducing the concept. I think later is where we say that the board should be.
But if you don't give headings that give an explanation of where you're going, people don't know your point, because you've gotten to it too late.
I guess we haven't made it yet.
Well, but you're
is all
making it
background.
there,
This
you're
is
making it there, which then leads the reader to understand where you're heading and the point that you're making.
I don't like the word ultimate. I would just go with the board's responsibility for expenditures. I like the general change below. And the reason that we have the comment about the vice president and executive and finance committee was we didn't want to tell the board what to do. We could kill that sentence also. It's a 50-50 as far as we're
I
concerned.
would kill the sentence I've always wanted to, but I wouldn't put in ultimate, I don't like it.
Okay, so I would suggest to be delete ultimate and.
These, all of, the point that you're making in this section is that contrary to the current interpretation, that everything is passed through, which means the board doesn't really have much of a say in what the local jurisdictions are doing with their proposals. You're actually making the point that the board has got to take responsibility for everything.
Well, part of the point we're making is if the board isn't doing it, we can't do it either.
Well, yes, but
But that
that's a
happens
separate
later,
one.
we're telling
That's
the
a
story
separate
later.
one.
We're
I
telling-
mean,
we're
you're not
giving the
telling
back-
a story here, you're writing a report which gives an indication of the points that you are making, so that people understand where you're driving
Okay,
towards.
we spent 15 minutes in the first section on the word NWPA, and I'm not gonna spend another 15 minutes
All
here.
right, then,
We, as the committee that wrote this, do not like the.
well, you are no longer the committee that's writing this document.
Okay, but
The
we will all
full
vote, no,
COC.
we will
All
all
right,
vote
let's
no.
vote.
We will all vote no then. Let's just get on.
Well,
with it.
who's the we all?
I don't know, we'll find out.
Okay, let's, if this is the way it's gonna come out.
Okay, let's do the
let's-
writing committee. If
let's-
the writer doesn't think that it's being stated clearly.
That's no longer the prerogative. Once it becomes, the COC is writing this document, this has always been the problem, is that the individual committees were not supposed to be writing it. The writing committee would make it organized and explain it properly. This is a way of signaling where you're heading. This is a word that gives the reader some notion of what the point
We
is that
just
you're
really
making.
don't like the word. If it was there was some
Final
other way to.
responsibility, there, ultimately, I don't know what you mean by don't like the word is the word, it means the final, the buck stops there.
I hate to say it, but I had given specific instructions that nobody was really to change my report substantively, because nobody could actually change anything who was outside of, our committee, John and myself,
Mhm.
because we know specifically the language that we want to put in cannot be applied here as well.
I don't think so,
Why is it different?
because this, I think that Larry's point is that they're very specific financial analysis, so that if you come and rewrite its section, you might not be saying the specific
Is that what
financial
you're
point.
saying, Larry?
Let me make a suggestion.
I think
because-
this
let
is
me
what I'm
make a
saying in
suggestion,
our
because there are, what, 8 of us here? And it doesn't mean that we have to all do what Lucy wants, right? So
No,
let's- so
indeed,
let's-
Lucy's been giving up every point so
Right,
far.
so let's just
So
take this
let's
on
just,
this one
let's
particular
make, find a different word than ultimate then.
or maybe you can just do a quick run around and say.
All right,
Do we want to, how many people want to keep the word ultimate? Raise your hand, please.
Keep,
Keep.
Oh.
2, 3. Okay, how many people want to delete the word ultimate?
Wait, leave the one.
Delete the word.
Delete the word.
Oh, okay, 1, 2, 3, you win. Okay, so let's go on. Okay. All right. Now, is the next question, you wanted to delete that final
I'm
thing
happy
about,
to delete that sentence, but Lucy also questioned here.
The board can delegate
Yeah.
questions, thank you.
yeah, so you
Let's
guys
take
get
that
with
out.
deleting it? Okay, good. Okay. Good? So now we're-
Okay, so we're on page 3 here. We originally wrote our comments focus both on MWPA staff oversight and board governance. I think maybe you're trying to make the same sort of,
Well, the question is the lack of response to CS3 requests, that implies that, again, as I said earlier, that it's.
Yes,
They-
this is
they
where
were-
we've deferred this conversation, and I
Yeah,
think that there are two different things.
Right.
You're saying that we can't possibly know anything because staff hasn't done its review.
Correct.
I say that the information exists, that we could have reviewed it, but we can't get access to it because we couldn't break apart that report. So that we know it exists, but just we haven't been able to get our hands on it.
I think it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Okay, well
I
then,
mean, I think we were given a lot of, we've talked about this before.
let's go through this precisely. We were given a big, enormous document that the work plan subcommittee, which, as I understand it, does contain some actual costs. Not all of them, but
17.
some, which the work plan subcommittee said, no, we can't figure this out. And then Mark went back and did a review and came up with 8 that actually are there, 8 that you can get at with some accuracy, and one that's
You can
not-
get there, but it's complicated.
okay. So what we have here is the information exists. We couldn't get at it. We asked staff to present it to us. Whether the formatting is an issue. There is one element that we still didn't have, which is explanations for any discrepancies. So staff can get that. We, not 99% of the actual costs. It could, or maybe 100%. But we're still missing something that we had asked for originally. We hadn't got quite in the way that we could use it. Work plan subcommittee threw up its hands, said no, we can't. We'd like it in a different format. That didn't happen. We tried again in the last couple of weeks to get the information that we wanted, that was approved last year by the COC, was in the recommendations. It didn't come through. So that is, staff is not responding to our request as much as it is that the information exists, but it's not coming to us.
So I'm a little confused because our comments are about oversight.
Yes.
Our comments focus on the staff's oversight and the government's oversight. So what follows is all our thoughts about, hey.
And we're an oversight body, right?
No, sorry, MW staff's oversight of the jurisdictions, right?
Okay, so this section at this point you haven't yet brought up. You're talking about citizens' oversight responsibilities in this section.
I'm talking about staff's oversight.
Yeah.
We're talking about the staff's oversight and the board's oversight, not our oversight.
Yeah, no, look at this subheading right here on this section, page 2.
Yeah.
Citizen Oversight Committee responsibilities.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's true. That's right.
That sentence.
Yeah, but see, yeah, that's right. So we come down to that section is kind of done in the prior in the penultimate paragraph. With this overview, the COC has comments about the stuff which follows. And then our comments focus on both staff oversight and board oversight.
And the point should be that the COC did not get every request met
But I don't
in the
think
COC section.
I don't think that added language is necessary because we go into it later.
Well, okay, let's, can you show me where?
John, that's on you.
The COC needs evidence from the MWPA
This is where
staff that they have reasonably investigated and
changes the whole
confirmed
meaning.
all the jurisdictions' expenditures for local projects in defendable space and use.
I guess that's because I didn't really ever think that there was a lack of response to us.
Okay, there just has been the last 2 weeks. This has been, this whole, Mark began this entire meeting with a question about who should ask for information.
So what do you mean there's lack of response in the last 2 weeks?
Yes, well, it was in the fall when we asked for information, and it came to us in the form that you guys said you couldn't handle it. And then again,
I see that as just the development of this organization.
well, that's a point that we can make, but this is nonetheless, this is
I know, but when you say that they're not responding to us, that has a different tone. It's not the tone that I really want to put in
Okay,
here.
well, this is what has to go back then for a rewrite. But I'm not necessarily going to remove that point. Well, we can have our usual vote.
We can do a vote again.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's vote on
Well,
this.
is
Should we
there-
leave
Is there no
this
way to make this?
lack of response to COC requests?
Let's just think of if there's a way we can fix this.
Yeah.
Our comments focus both on the MWPA staff's oversight. Oh, now, so we would, the question is, do we make comments about that they didn't have the data in a way we would like to? Let's have to think.
They don't have the data at all in some point, at some point. They do have the data, others, and we weren't provided with it.
And the
Those are
lack,
two different things.
and the lack of data and information from the public agencies, member agencies.
Yeah, what do we, the
That were
change we
provided in
made, yeah, the
response
change
to-
we made that you had last time, and
Yeah.
that could be added here also.
Right, it's the lack of information that's provided by the member agencies in response to
Yeah, because we say
staff
here,
request.
we say there, right?
Okay.
Although local information about local defenseless project expenditures were shared with CSC, MWPA staff have not obtained or provided complete records. So
Yeah.
maybe we take your comment from before and say that we have our comments,
Shifted.
instead of focus both, it focuses on 3 things. It focuses on staff oversight, it focuses on board oversight, and it focuses on the sentence that you gave earlier.
Right.
And do that again. I think that works.
Yeah, okay.
Got
So this is, you
Got it.
you were just highlighting Lucy's
Right.
language here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know, we like that.
There's no finger pointing, really, when you spread it out.
No, I think that's fine, okay. So now we get to this next part here, and what I would suggest is, I liked whoever wrote this last part, although some limited information about core local, that language. I think that language, if you scoot it up, first get rid of the capital letters, right? Scoot it up and put it above the sentence, the COC needs evidence, and I think we should, confirmation is a better word. What we're trying to say here is that what Lucy said was, you're right, they had some, they didn't have everything, and then we say next that we needed to know that they had done a reasonable, there was not enough evidence for us to conclude they did a reasonable investigation. So I like that language. I think we should just move it up a paragraph rather. And then,
Can you clarify for me?
Yeah.
Let me scroll to.
Take the although language right there, next down, keep going down. Yeah. Take that language, cut it, and paste it up above, kill all those caps. That's just a comment.
Yeah.
But in fact, I think it's one of the issues that signposting for people where we've reached, is it a finding? Is it a recommendation? We did that in the transparency report where we gave it a little heading. I think it would be helpful to the reader to have a little.
So we're doing those all in caps, right?
Yeah, well, no. I put it all in caps so that you could.
I
distinguish it.
misspoke, the bold, I misspoke.
Oh,
The bold,
yeah.
the bolds are supposed to be the findings, right?
Well, but if that makes it clearer if you actually just say finding.
So we'll let the writer figure that out and do that consistently throughout the whole
We'll
document.
decide, we'll do it consistently.
Yeah, whatever I'm totally clear, I don't care, I think you're right, we wanna make sure that's why we made it bold, so you could spot it.
Right,
So it's a good
but I think
point.
Makes it clearer where you're going with it.
Okay, so anyway, so we're gonna get rid of all that typing and then know that the report writer will figure out the best way to make sure that you can find the findings.
You're gonna use confirmation instead of evidence.
Yeah, because I think confirmation is a better word, right?
I would agree.
Is that in the bold section? Oh, confirmation,
Yeah.
confirmed?
Comment?
That you use, then you'll be.
The COC.
Rebecca would like
The
to.
COC needs.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Confirmation.
There's a,
The COC needs evidence from MWPA staff to reasonably investigate and confirm.
there's a whole
Yeah, there's
different
a few
conceptual
places.
thing here. The COC needs evidence or confirmation or whatever versus the COC needs the report and the information. If we're gonna do what the Measure C asked us to do, to review the work plan and say, does it meet the Measure C request for what we are supposed to be doing, we can't do that unless we look at the information. We cannot just look at, did staff do their job? That's not what it's asking us to do. It's asking us to review the information.
That sounds like it's asking us to be auditors.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. And the other thing is that if we're asking for an attestation from a governing body's executive officer and the head of their governing body and put it in a resolution, that would be confirmation versus what you're asking for, which is the raw detail of effectively doing the audit for an individual agency and doing it 17 times.
No, but isn't that what you're doing, Larry, when you
No,
do the
I'm not.
finance review? You're
No, I'm
looking
not.
at whether the actual 60% was transmitted and the 20% was transmitted.
But I'm not looking at every agency's
Oh, no.
individual projects to determine if they've met their 20% threshold.
No, they couldn't have exceeded it because they only got 20%.
No, but part of that evidence or confirmation is to establish whether it was spent in accordance with the terms for Measure C.
Well, that's the analysis that the work plan review does.
Based on looking at what management does.
Based
You
on-
couldn't just say that the COC finds that the MWPA staff have reasonably investigated and confirmed all the jurisdictional expedition. In other words, make your finding and state it. You found that they actually did their job.
No, that's not what we're saying, it's the opposite of that.
Yeah, and there's,
Yeah.
our choice of language, I think,
Right, but
is
it's just sort of throwing
kind
it
of odd
open.
because you
Yeah,
use
that's-
evidence and investigation rather than confirmation or review,
Right.
for example, and it has two separate inferences.
Yeah.
You know, there's the inference of malfeasance in the prior.
You mean if you use evidence?
evidence,
Yeah.
investigation.
So I think we agree, we would change that from evidence to confirmation. We just need to have another word problem because we've got confirmed in there twice, so we just need to rewrite
Yeah,
that
yeah.
sentence. I guess I would recommend that we put Lucy's first sentence up above our sentence, but I don't know that I wanna put Lucy's last sentence in there. Can we just delete that, or is there something that needs to be included?
Well, this is where we keep going off the road. I think there are two different things going on in this finding. I think that there's your suggestion that staff needs to have confirmed it. We run a very significant risk if we simply rely on staff. We just become a rubber stamp. So staff says, "Yep, we checked everything."
No,
And then, we say, "Oh, okay,
that's not
done."
right, no, we don't accept their word for it, we look at their underlying evidence.
That's what I'm
And
saying.
we should-
Not
we should
providing
be- and
to us.
become satisfied that they've done a decent job, right? I mean, next year, so next year, when you have your schedules and all your worksheets, I would suspect that whoever's doing that work is gonna say to you, how did you make sure that was right? What diligence did you do with those agencies? Did you go to them and talk to them and learn about it? And what's in your file that proves that you've done the work? That's what I'm expecting he's gonna do next year, right?
And to give an example of John's point, when we sat down and went through my files that I do have, he saw the process and didn't feel like it was adequate.
Okay. But I still think that they're two different things. There is what's the work that staff does
Mhm.
and whether it's adequate, reasonable. And then there's the actual information, is it there? And has staff actually got everything that whatever they end up reviewing or how they end up reviewing it, has staff produced what we need to
Yeah,
see?
the 17 agencies have to give them information, obviously.
Or staff has to go
Or
collect it and present it.
It
And
really
then
comes
further
down,
look at it and test it and
And we look
determine
at
it's
it.
reasonable.
When you say we're not gonna be a rubber stamp because staff has done all the work, you say, no, we're gonna independently.
We're gonna look at their underlying work to determine whether their underlying work is robust.
And,
Okay.
If it's not
and-
robust, then we're gonna say that you haven't done enough
Of
work.
the underlying work of staff?
Yeah, staff.
but that doesn't mean that
That's
we
not
audit,
really
we
what
don't
we
go to agencies separately,
No,
we
we
don't
do
look
not.
at, and we don't look at every
No.
single thing, we can
I
take.
thought you wanted.
We can
to
look
get
at all
some of that.
provided, we can, if anything is any kind of a red flag, we can ask for further evidence. But I don't think we get, it's the same conversation we've been having
Yeah,
since
it
we
is
started.
endlessly the same conversation.
And it's part of that whole big discussion that we're gonna have when we get to the, and the underlying issue is Measure C says we'll do a review of
That's
the work
your
program.
interpretation of Measure C,
It's the
right?
wording of it says you're gonna review the work program.
Well, we're not
But-
talking
but
about
what
not
you
reviewing
mean
it,
by-
it's just about
by
how.
the word
reviewing
review,
the work
yeah.
plan is.
Means there's certain
When we-
basic
when we-
data points presented, we look at it and say.
The part I'm arguing
Okay,
about is,
let's not, we're going off the rails
Right.
here.
All right, you wanna go back to this?
Okay.
I don't know that we.
So I
So
think
the last thing
we've
I
agreed
suggested
to.
was-
I know that there's been an agreement to move one paragraph.
Okay.
Yeah, slide the paragraph up.
But we went off the rails because I'd like to remove the
The
second
second
sentence.
But I still need clarification on the COC needs evidence from MWPA staff. Are we keeping that word evidence? or
No,
we
we're
change that?
changing the word evidence,
To confirm.
confirmation,
Confirmation.
but we do have,
But then you have to confirm.
And then
we have
we'll
confirmed
rewrite
later,
that.
so
Yeah,
it's gonna
confirm
need a
later.
little rewriting.
So I just trying to understand this, John, if
We could delete the word and confirm.
And investigated was gonna go to review.
That's
Yeah.
good, I like that also.
Yeah.
Reasonably reviewed, I agree, yeah.
okay, so, but you're sort of looking at staff as one of our responsibilities to make sure that it's doing its job. That's one separate area. There's also the
Review.
actual subject matter itself that staff would be reviewing, which is a work plan. So there's staff's review of the work plan, and then there's the work plan. Now, if the evidence isn't there, we don't have anything that we can review. We don't know if there are any red flags. We don't know if staff adequately reviewed it or not. If we're not looking at any underlying data, in some very summarized format.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's, I think we're making the same point, but I don't know why we start.
I agree with you. So what words do you want to change? The COC needs confirmation.
I would
from
just break it
MWPA
into two different.
that they have
sections.
reasonably
Reviewed.
Mhm.
that all jurisdictions and local practice expenses are used in line with the person's authority in order for the COC to fulfill its responsibility to determine whether spending is consistent with the tax measure. Because earlier, we made the commentary about what we do, right? Because we said, up a few pages earlier, we said, gotta find it. I've read this so many times, but I can't see it anymore. There, yeah, COC on page 3, COC can look at evidence of due diligence by MWPA staff and those of the board charged with governance and form an independent opinion about the adequacy of staff and board's due diligence as part of its responsibilities. Determine whether funds have been spent consistent with the tax measure, but the COC is not part of the control and governance process at MWPA. These responsibilities first rest with those charged with governance.
I think that that's right and absolutely fine, but then the COC is an oversight body itself.
Yes.
So it's certainly, if it wants to start scrutinizing staff as to whether it's doing its job,
Right.
but it also has a duty to look at the work plan itself. And so staff came back and said, everything's fabulous, and we had seen 5 projects that looked bizarre to us. How would we know?
Sure, of course. Well, it's a perfect example of that. Exactly. And this is what we did because we said, we threw a red flag on the idea that paying full time for a ranger when it rains all winter doesn't seem like that's directly aligned. We made that comment because we could see enough data. And when I talked to him, I said, okay, how many people did they hire? How much did they find? We asked him a bunch of questions which he didn't know the answer to, which made us conclude that enough work had not been done. So that's literally an example of what you're asking. And it's evidence why we will be able to do that next year when the file is more robust.
How do you know that's the only red flag?
Well,
So how many red flags did you find?
Well, we didn't do the work because there wasn't enough there for us to look at. So that's why we formed those.
and we did look at, we
Take me
looked
back to it, yeah, you looked at.
at the work plan. I've seen the numbers for everything except the local.
But also actual costs.
Yeah, actual cost.
See, that's,
Good.
so they
The
did,
only thing that you are questioning that I have not seen is the explanation of the difference.
No, we also haven't seen actual costs
I have seen actual costs.
for the locals
Yes.
and the D-states.
No, not for the locals in the D states.
Okay,
I have for
that's-
San Rafael,
No,
but I have
that's
for the
okay.
core,
Yeah,
but.
but I think this is where, I think that we need to make sure that information that we can review, independently of
Yeah.
staff review, that would give us any indication if there's a red flag, and we might disagree with staff, otherwise we're just
And I
rubber
think
stamping.
absolutely we're going to have
But
that
that's all
next
that this
year.
is saying, but this is saying the COC needs to be provided with all the information that it has requested, and the agency agreed that it would furnish. This information includes explanations for any discrepancies. And but this is the key that we've been postponing
I'm not
our
sure
different.
what sentence we're
Oh, I see
on
what your
right
point is.
now.
I'm fine with that. Let's wait for it to come back. I get your point, and I'm not troubled with it.
So the last paragraph of page 3.
Yeah, so let's
We'll follow.
let's wait for Jennifer to come back.
Okay.
She's the one who wants it out, and you've convinced me that it's appropriate to be in. I get where you're coming from.
Okay, thank you.
And not to put the cart before the horse with Jennifer out of the room, but where would it go sequentially?
That's a good point. I think it would be,
Would it
I
go-
think it would
Would
go,
it slide up with that other?
it would go in bold and immediately after the COC needs confirmation paragraph. It's another finding.
Okay.
All right,
you have more than one, right?
Yeah.
so it would be separate.
Yeah.
All right, that
Alright.
that makes me happier.
Well, that's really important. Okay. Okay, a second. Okay, let's
The greater number of small favors, right?
Yes, let's move forward and understand we have to get back when she comes back in the room, right? All right, some specific examples of problematic staff review issues within the levels, that's just wording, that's fine. As far as I'm concerned. The beyond giving certification's fine. Requested. that's good.
So there is a comment here that I'm really just more confused about.
Yeah.
The COC notes that this, at page 4,
Mhm.
it says, COC notes that this requirement applies to local project funding only. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that.
And we as a group came to the decision, and I guess it maybe should have been the whole thing, that you didn't want to penalize defensible space programs that were
Adequate.
adequate to begin with.
Mhm.
So that, you know, that the, and I guess it's, I don't know where it is in the wording.
So we discussed this a long time ago, when we first did our little subcommittee thing, whatever the hell that was, months ago. One of the things that we talked about was this question. You were looking at it, right? I forget who that group was.
No, I wasn't there.
Okay, I just don't recall. But there was a question as to whether the 20%, the higher level service should be applied to D-space.
As well as local.
Yeah, and we all collectively discussed it. We raised the question as in a full meeting and said, well, that seems to be penalizing people who have been maybe done a fair amount of work already. And we concluded that we didn't need to apply that to that, let's say this very well, to D-space. And that's actually not in the document. It's not the way the document's written, as I recall. So that was the conclusion we had reached.
The higher, I think the document says higher level of service
Applies only
to local.
to local.
local.
I
I got it right. I have to find it again,
do you actually have a copy of the
but I
agreement?
got it right.
I agree. Yeah, it's just that the point of the benchmark was to give them, to have, and obviously they didn't have a distinction before the creation of the MWPA between D-space inspections and local projects that they were doing. So the benchmark wouldn't necessarily cover both. If monies are coming down from the agency to improve the D-space work,
Yeah.
that's not penalizing them, it's giving them extra money for that.
So anyway,
Yeah.
page 7, local D, it's D, ironically. Local specific, this is from the document. Local specific wild prevention efforts will be funded by 20% of the tax proceeds and allocate each member the proportion of the revenues raised. Members must certify that the tax measure proceeds are used consistent with the purpose of the authority and that the tax measure expenditures result in a higher level of service. So it's only that 20 that high level of service
Okay,
is
so
applied.
because it's in that section of the
Right,
agreement.
so it's,
All
that's
right, so
literally
I
what the
would
agreement says.
just take that sentence out because you're only talking about local and that gets to be sort of interpretation of the language.
I'm sorry, you've been lost.
So I'd say take the COC notes that this requirement applies to local project funding only.
Well, that's correct.
Okay, the benchmark itself does not make a distinction.
The
if you're
benchmark is
talking-
only for local funding. The benchmark
It's
is,
applied only to local.
Yeah, but
Yes.
the benchmark is something we came up with.
Indeed, yeah. But an additional means of demonstrating that Measure C funds are not being used to supplant.
The deal about the benchmark is you don't need it on core.
correct.
But they need a authority.
You can't do it on D-space.
Right.
Wasn't a division. The only place you can do it or that you need it is for local,
Exactly,
period.
exactly.
Yeah.
Agreed.
That's what we're saying.
And that's what this says.
And it makes it sound like you're making a note that the fact it only applies to local, it makes it sound like there's a problem with that.
Well,
Well, that's true. So why don't we just take the word
Yeah.
only off? Why don't we take the word only off?
Okay,
The CRC notice this requirement applies to local.
all right.
No, that sounds good.
You guys are cutting your pay, because Larry's saying you guys are getting paid by the word, and then you just gotta work.
Oh, no.
Well,
And-
actually, there is a difference sometimes with the one word or another.
Yeah, so.
there's a knot in there.
So when you read it.
I was like it by the hour,
Back.
so that's what I was.
TNN.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's get Jennifer back in the loop here. So what we decided to do is we are gonna keep that also because it is relevant and it's gonna be bolded and it's gonna follow that. So this goes up to the top, we do the wordsmithing in the middle and that stays in. And that's where we felt it was okay.
Okay.
But you were objecting, we didn't wanna do that without your knowing that that's where we ended up. So if you're okay with it, we can move on. Are you okay with it? Okay, move on.
So I want to just say, and we don't have to stop it, but it's, we've got 6 minutes left to 5 o'clock. For those of you who like to go on until midnight.
This time I have a standing recurring meeting on the third Tuesday at 5:30.
Oh, yes, oh,
Yeah,
yes,
we're making
yes,
some really good
yes.
progress here, but let's
I
just,
would
Yeah.
encourage you to continue.
why don't we make it,
Yeah.
we kind of know where we are.
Yeah.
So instead of opening a new project,
Yeah.
like, why don't we maybe stop now? Would be what I would suggest. You know, in council meetings, when it gets to 11, you don't open the thing after 11 because you know it's gonna go till 2 in the morning. So similar to that concept, we could stop now.
So
That's what I
that
did.
means we're stopping
We're stopping on page 4.
in the middle of the page.
And we covered higher level of service review, we deleted the word only, and I think that's the only change in that section, we're otherwise good with it, right?
Okay, so
So we start with funding staff positions will be when we come back together in a week.
Except we haven't, are we gonna leave the words requested?
We haven't
in the
gotten to
next
that yet.
paragraph?
I thought it was fine, and you guys just were, I mean, although someone have not obtained the requested adequate, it's kind of clumsy. Have not obtained the requested adequate consistent records demonstrating compliance to date. Yeah, it's kind of clumsy.
Yeah,
You know, we've already talked in the earlier page about all the request stuff, so I don't really care that much honestly, but it's,
Well, I mean,
no, I get you. I mean,
Adequate,
Why don't you
consistent
put it
records
in
as requested at the end.
Sure, that's fine.
All right,
It solves it.
I like it.
good
Yes.
solve, Larry. All right.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Great minds.
John, are you okay with changing investigate to confirmed on all instances? Not
Yes.
just the one, yeah, and same with.
evidence.
Evidence to confirm.
evidence and
and
investigated.
Investigate to review.
Sure,
that's
we can
good.
do a word search
We
for
we
that.
only looked at it in one place
Yeah.
that there were.
No, that's a good idea.
I appreciate that.
So,
So we're finishing that section, the high level of service review. To the end of that, we just leave.
We're starting, we're gonna
Just-
reconvene under funding staff.
Okay, so we're leaving in the JPA agreement language.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so we're starting at funding position.
Oh, no, we have little things in here. Yeah.
So, and the point about the JPA agreement is that it replaces the word tax burden.
That's fine.
Okay, all right.
What's that?
It's no, it just put in, it says JPA agreement at the very bottom. And what had been deleted was the word tax measure and replaced with the word JPA.
That's the facts of it, I don't, that's fine.
Yeah.
so to sum up,
Yes. Yeah.
we have,
Well, we voted on 8A, and make you have to, let's be formal, make a motion to continue to the next agenda, to the
So
next
moved.
meeting.
So
Second.
continue.
Yes.
all in favor? Um,
Future items.
Oh, one question, for the next meeting, for the edits that have occurred thus far, can you turn them around quickly enough? And would there be any problem if he shares them with me to take a quick read to make sure that?
We will do our best, just with knowledge that we have the
board
board
meeting.
meeting, the work plan and that.
Right.
So that- But Friday, just looking, I'm not promising, but we'll do our best.
Okay, and would it be okay, if maybe the two of us, if we could get it turned around?
Yeah.
Okay,
We'll do our best.
and we won't, if we have any problems, we won't change anything, because that needs to be done here,
Today's Tuesday.
we'll just know that.
Yeah.
We will observe and said you might.
Okay.
You can come back to everybody to say you think you might.
Maybe you and I can
That's okay?
confer tomorrow.
Um,
No, we have to adjourn. No, we have to adjourn.
I just have one item.
Oh, okay,
Oh,
sorry.
future agenda.
future agenda items.
I'm gonna recommend that we have, and for better, lack of a better word, a polishing committee. That two or three members that would assist the editor, the layout person, all right, in the final product, but not change anything substantively. The polishing, waxing, whatever it can be, okay?
And Pat, whether we want to convene an ad hoc bylaw committee to come to bring a recommendation forward.
And then agenda discussion for the retreat.
Yeah,
Yep.
and a thing to think about is whether to have a facilitator.
We do
We
have,
have one.
We have.
Oh, we have one?
Todd Cusmano volunteered.
So a policy committee, an ad hoc bylaw committee, a retreat committee.
So cute.
So the retreat agenda is not fully finalized yet.
Well, we have the
We have-
broad outline.
Staff can prepare a staff report for that committee item or agenda item for you guys to review. Okay.
Anything else?
I'm trying to think, I think
Better
that's,
conditioning.
have you summarized enough of that?
I think so.
So that's a wrap.
That's how I felt
You
walking
wanna
around
go
the
around and
building
say,
today.
what do we all think
I was
we
like,
accomplished?
That's
I
my
know
thought.
if you want to do it.
I do think we've accomplished it.
We did.
All right.
Oh, I think we did. And we will, we can stop recording, I suppose.
Okay,
We have to adjourn.
Oh, I thought we had,
Motion.
the meeting is adjourned.
At
5
5 o'clock.
PM.
At
On the
five-
dot.
Oh, how about that?